What makes a game truly unforgettable? I mean, is it the action, the music, the mechanics? Or is it that lingering feeling that even decades later, you can still vividly remember driving down its neon-lit streets as if you actually lived there? Today, we are looking at a title that totally transcends its medium. We're talking about a release that isn't just a video game, but a legendary cultural icon. Welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here today because we are setting out to deconstruct a true digital masterpiece, Grand Theft Auto Vice City. Released back in 2002, this title didn't just iterate on what came before it. It completely set a new standard for storytelling, freedom, and world building. Our goal today is to enthusiastically break down exactly why this specific release revolutionized the gaming industry, and why, more than 20 years later, so many people still consider it the absolute peak of the entire series.
Okay, let's dive into this blueprint. First, we'll step right into the 1980s. Then, we'll follow the rise of Tommy Vercetti, unpack a living crime drama filled with power, greed, and betrayal, detail the open-world revolution, and finally examine its enduring cultural legacy. Let's take this masterpiece apart piece by piece. Let's start with our first pillar. Welcome to the 1980s, capturing a decade. Because when you boot up this game, the very first thing you notice actually isn't the shooting or the driving, it's the incredibly visceral atmosphere that instantly transports you to another era. Rockstar Games wasn't trying to give us a historically strict, one-to-one recreation of Miami here. Instead, they drew heavily from 1980s crime television and cinema to build this exaggerated, stylized world of massive drug empires and flashing nightclubs. They nailed the sensory vibe perfectly. Think about it. Palm trees swaying under glowing sunsets, neon lights reflecting off the wet pavement, and luxury yachts resting in the harbor. The city literally feels entirely alive. And a massive part of that atmosphere is the auditory layer. Instead of generic background noise, the radio stations feature iconic artists that genuinely define the decade. Cruising down Ocean Beach while listening to classic rock, pop hits, and heavy synth music, it turns the world itself into a literal time machine. The music creates these unforgettable, completely unscripted moments that make the environment an active, breathing part of the story. But of course, a great world needs a great lens to view it through. That brings us to part two. The rise of Tommy Vercetti, from pawn to kingpin. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it breaks down our central character. So think back to the early 2000s for a second. A lot of protagonists back then were silent avatars, right? Just blank slates lacking real personality. Tommy Vercetti was completely different. As our central character, he is highly intelligent, incredibly ambitious, super vocal, and remarkably calm under pressure. He brought this swagger, this level of confidence that was genuinely revolutionary for the medium at the time. And his character arc is a really fascinating progression. He begins hoping for a fresh start, right? He's released from years in prison and just wants a new beginning. But almost immediately, he finds himself trapped in this dangerous criminal underworld filled with rival gangs and corrupt businessmen. What makes this so compelling is that Tommy isn't a traditional hero. He actually transforms from a guy taking orders into a true kingpin, building an entire criminal empire through sheer strategy and determination. This brings us right into the emotional climax of our deconstruction. To make Tommy's rise meaningful, the game absolutely requires a stellar supporting cast, leading to Section 3, Power, Greed, and Betrayal, a living crime drama. The dynamics of this supporting cast are what truly elevate the narrative. Every single character you meet has their own unique motivations and goals. Some act as loyal allies, while others are totally unpredictable wildcards. And these relationships are constantly shifting, with betrayals happening over money or power. It transforms the experience from a simple action game into a living, breathing crime drama, where business partnerships routinely fall apart. As Tommy climbs higher and his empire grows, trust becomes a dangerous game. So the crucial point is right here. Every step toward power creates new enemies. The narrative constantly reminds us that in this criminal underworld, loyalty is temporary, and the most devastating betrayal usually comes from those you trust the absolute most. Honestly, beneath the surface-level action, the game is hiding immense emotional weight. It explores ambition, greed, loyalty, revenge, and the ultimate price of success. It's this brilliant rhythm of deep thematic exploration hidden just beneath the bright neon surface, giving the story a resonance that sticks with you long, long after the credits roll. Now let's transition over to the actual mechanics for Part 4, revolutionizing the open world, expanding the sandbox. Because when this game dropped in 2002, we have to remember that open-world concepts were still in their relative infancy, just evolving from the groundwork laid a year prior by GTA 3. The sheer volume of new mechanics they introduced is just overwhelming in the best possible way. Rockstar expanded the sandbox to include hunting for hidden packages, actual property ownership, and dynamic side activities like taxi missions, police missions, and street races. You weren't just completing linear story missions anymore. You were actively building and managing a business empire. It made exploration deeply rewarding and made the overall gameplay vastly more cinematic. Because of these mechanics, you could spend hundreds of hours of absolute freedom in this city without ever even finishing the main story. And this brilliantly illustrates the level of player agency that was an absolute revelation. If you look at modern open-world games today, they are literally still borrowing these exact structural ideas that Vice City helped to popularize over 2 decades ago. Which naturally leads us to the resolution of our explainer. Section 5, an enduring cultural legacy, why it lasts. How exactly does a video game from 2002 maintain such a massive, imposing presence in modern gaming culture?
Well, let's draw a sharp contrast to answer that. Graphics and technology, they improve with every single console generation. They constantly change, and they inevitably age over time. But an immersive atmosphere and feeling, that never gets old. Vice City's greatest achievement wasn't its raw pixel count. It was how it made players feel. It remains perfectly immersive because it tells a cohesive story.
And today, that legacy lives on incredibly actively. It's constantly replayed for pure nostalgia by older fans, for sure, but it also inspires modern speedrunners pushing its technical limits. It fosters a vibrant community of modders and content creators, and amazingly, it continues to attract entirely new generations of gamers who just want to experience the magic for themselves. The combination of music, atmosphere, and narrative turned it from a simple video game into an undeniable cultural icon. Legends aren't always remembered just because they were the biggest of their time. They're remembered because they captured something truly special. And that is exactly why this title stands tall among the greatest masterpieces ever crafted. I want to leave you with a thought to reflect on today. When you look back at all your gaming memories, which GTA game is your all-time favorite? And exactly why does it hold that spot for you? Think about the atmosphere, the characters, and the freedom that made it stick with you. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.